Okay, good evening, everybody. I'm Denise Clay Murray, and this is Hall Monitor. I'm here with my co host, Lance Haver, and our other co host, Larry McGlynn, is out tonight, but hopefully he's able to check out the show. Tonight, we're going to be talking to Sharon Vaughn, who is running for one of the City Council at Large seats that's coming up in the midterm special election. And also, Lance and I are going to have a little chat about the hour of everyone's life that they'll probably never get back, otherwise known as the Senate debate last night, and also about a newcomer to the mayor's race for 2023. And Lance, talk a little bit about what you're going to be talking to us about regarding medical debt.
Right. I'm going to talk about student debt and medical debt. And while the federal government focuses on student debt, I'm going to go over how medical debt is actually, in some cases, worse for people than student debt. That medical debt ends up forcing people to do without medical services. Well, student debt forces people to do without buying a new car. Medical debt can actually end your access to your doctor.
Thank you. Medical debt, for those of you who are like newcomers to Hall Monitor, is something I harp on a lot. So I'm glad that we're going to talk about it. But before we go there, before we do that, here's our interview with Sharon Vaughn, one of the candidates for City Council at Large in the upcoming special election.
This meeting is being recorded.
Okay, we are here with Sharon Vaughn, candidate at large for Philadelphia City Council. Ms. Vaughn, thank you so much for being with us.
My pleasure. Thank you.
So can you tell us a little bit about your background?
Sure. I am a mother of two. I have been married for 27 years. And my professional background is that I have been a city employee for 33 years in city council. I began my career with Augusta Clark as a clerk, and I went from when she retired. Marion Taskell asked me to be a staff member on her team because I was known for my constituent services. And upon her retirement, I decided to work with Councilman Derek Green. Derek Green and I were colleagues on Marion Taskell's staff prior to her resignation. And so we had a bond and a good working relationship. And that's where I eventually resigned from after he resigned to go run for mayor. And with my experience, I had had every position in City Hall that you could possibly have on City Council. And I decided, well, the only one that I had not had was to be the actual council person. So when I started thinking about what I was going to do once Derek resigned, I said, let me try to see if I can win the race as to be the council person, because I knew it would be a special election from other council people that had either resigned to run for other offices or had to leave for other reasons. And I've been fortunate enough to be the elected candidate by the Democratic City Committee. I also am a delegate for the state of Pennsylvania. I don't know if you all know that Senator Sharif Street is the first chairman of the state committee, and that's African American in 236 years. And I ran to be his Madam Chair and won. I'm a committee person, and I also am a ward leader for the 42nd Ward. The boundaries for the 42nd Ward is 5th and Alany, down 5th Street on the east side to Hunting Park, and over to Whitaker Avenue. So I wear a lot of hats in politics. And so this is the one that I never had. And I'm being fortunate enough to have a good chance at being the at-large candidate.
So it's there's a big difference, I think, though, between being a staffer and being the council person.
Well, yeah, there is. But the thing about being in council, or at least being a part of Dear Green's team, we were a team. So I got 6 years of experience under him of what it would actually be like being the council person in the chief of staff capacity, attending many meetings with the councilmen, scheduling those meetings, making decisions about legislation that was pending, being involved in creating legislation, a part of the research, and working along with the technical staff, which is a team of attorneys that are assigned to city council, as well as the legislative that we had.
So, what are your legislative priorities should you win the election?
My not so well, my priorities are basically trying to make sure that a lot of this gun violence is eliminated. I would like to see more people given opportunities to go to training in many of the unions that we have in the city of Philadelphia. I believe not enough opportunities is given to the constituency. I also want to make sure that the blight and trash that we see around the city on a continuous basis is addressed in an extreme manner, that the sanitation department is held accountable for making sure our streets are clean, and also the police department. I believe that they need more assistance, and they need the officers to show up and do their jobs.
Now, having worked with Councilmember Green, do you foresee continuing his work on the public bank?
Oh, absolutely. I am hoping that legislation is brought forward, because there's nothing better than giving an entrepreneur an opportunity to expand his business and create more jobs and grow in whatever services that they feel that we need. Public banking is a excellent idea. I was intricately a part of that, and I am definitely for it. I think that it's necessary to take a company from maybe 4 to 10, if possible, and they need the opportunity, not in the traditional sense, going to the banks that require a certain amount of capital in their bank, or other things that they require in order to issue loans.
So, how do you intend to settle the current stalemate with the mayor?
I of course will have to have some meetings with him, and see, all of the new council people that are coming on board. We plan to get together and possibly lobby him to see if we can get some of the issues that are on the table or have been stalemated, as you said, that we find important to us, or more important to our constituency that we serve. Um, I've known Councilman Kenny many years. I mean, Mayor Kenny for many years, and I hope that I will have a listening audience when I request a sit down with him to see how we can make things better for our city, because that's the ultimate goal. We're here to serve Philadelphia.
And we talked a little bit about this already, but can you give us some of your key policy initiatives for reducing poverty?
Oh, yes, we did discuss that a little bit in mentioning training. And I want to try to see if we can work on the tax incentives that we now have in place. Um, Unfortunately, a lot of businesses feel overtaxed, and that we need to find a way. I don't know what that way is as of yet, because it's not something that I've had an opportunity to work on, but we want to bring businesses back to the city. We want to make them happy having their businesses in the city of Philadelphia. So those things have to be decided as to what we're going to do to make that happen. I don't know what they are at this time. I cannot say, but there are incentives in place. Maybe we can lower some of the tax rates that we charge them now, and find other ways to make ends meet in our government body.
And I'd like to bring in Denise Clay Murray here on the Hall Monitor.
I'm
Hi.
sorry.
Hi, Ms. Vaughn. Thank you for joining us. I really appreciate it.
Hmm.
I guess my first question for you is, you've been a part of the council system for a very long time.
Yes.
What have you seen about it that's changed? And do you think that as somebody who has been a part of council for a while, you'll be able to negotiate those changes if you become a council person?
Well, you could just take a look at some of the faces in council. They're all young. Um, they have fresh ideas. They have what their own way of doing things, and they're excited about making the changes that are necessary to make our city more effective. Um, I think that when we move out of the way, older people sometimes, that we allow the younger, fresh ideas to come in and bring us up to date, make us better in the jobs that we are performing. And that can't happen if people stay stagnant or stay in positions well beyond a certain amount of time. Now, with council, they don't have term limits. I know that was addressed in the past, and it's something that I would like to revisit because I don't think that as you get extremely more seasoned, that you should stay. There should be a limit. Like judges have to resign when they turn 70, and the mayor can only have 2 terms. I believe that that is important in keeping a city progressive and moving.
Now, I don't know how much campaigning you've had to do as part of running for council in a special election, but what has that experience been like?
Exhausting. I've had to do a lot of campaigning. Ward leaders want to see me across the city of Philadelphia. Josh Shapiro and his team are constantly here doing get out the vote initiatives. I am often invited to fundraisers that have to attend. I am being asked to speak at many, many events. I have one later this week where there are a group of attorneys that would like to hear from me. So it is running. I am running like a regular candidate, despite the fact that I have the endorsement and this is a special election. Everyone wants to see me. They want to get to know me. I have the media that is interested in getting to know me and ask me questions about what my plans are. So it is ongoing.
Okay. Now, are you intending on running for this office in 2023 once this term expires, or have you thought about that yet?
I have thought about it, and no, I do not plan to do that at this point. At that point, I will, when this term expires, I would have had 35 years with the city of Philadelphia, and I would be 60 years old. My goal is to retire.
Okay. But beyond retirement, I understand you hope to retire as a city council person, but
Correct.
after that, are you like going to completely say, okay, I'm going to Tahiti and Philly, you can do what you need to do on your own, or are you planning on remaining active in the community?
I definitely will be active. I still will be the ward leader here until the end of that term, and hopefully I will get reelected. I am planning to get more involved with the Democratic Party, volunteer more time there, and hopefully I will be responsible for getting more people to pay attention to the process of getting out and voting. I plan to be committed to the state committee and making sure that we pay attention to the people that try to run across the state of Pennsylvania as well. So retirement is just one from one job. I still will be very heavily involved in the process and what happens with Philadelphia. This is my hometown. I love it. I've been here my entire life. And Tahiti sounds too hot and too many bugs.
Okay. But you mentioned voting and specifically the process of voting. Recently, former President Donald Trump was talking to folks at one of his many rallies about voter fraud. And he mentioned specifically that Philadelphia needed to be a target for people to look at in the midterms. What do you think that the state's Democratic Committee needs to do to kind of like make sure that people who are trying to use the process properly are able to do so without any kind of, and I guess this is the best way to put it, knuckleheadism going on?
Good word. I like that. I'm gonna have to remember to use it. Knuckleheadism. Well, Donald Trump is an interesting man. We all know that. And Philadelphia, because it is a condensed city with what is it, 1.3 million people, we have the capacity to produce candidates that we want as winners. And I think that intimidates a lot of the rest of Pennsylvania because if excuse me, if we did what we were supposed to do, did the research, got out here and exercised our rights, there would be no stopping Philadelphia. Unfortunately, those more rural places don't have as many people, so they don't have the same amount of power. So stories and fabrications will be created to try to make the rest of the state think that this is a crazy place and that we can't be trusted. It's not the case. um, I understand through my state obligations, there are people that in this day and age think that we step out of our homes and we have to step over people that are addicted and that we can't go to a corner store without encountering um, someone that's begging for money or we may see someone on our steps using an abusive substance. Parts of the state think that we can't go from our front doors to our cars without being carjacked. We know that that is not the case. We live our daily lives. And of course, we do have an abundance of crime, but that's across every metropolitan city. It's not unique to Philadelphia, but it is definitely something that happens, and it's because of situations where people don't have the things that they need to survive, and so they think that their option is to take it, and that's a very unfortunate thing. But we have to give them other resources, other ways to take care of themselves, and let them know that they have the same opportunity as people that don't create crimes or don't commit crimes have, where you have to go out here, get yourself trained, find a job, stick to it, show up, and do the best that you can, so that you can collect a income to sustain yourself.
Okay. Well, thank you. I'm going to turn you over to Larry McGlynn for more on Hall Monitor. And you're listening to Hall Monitor on WPPM 106.5.
Okay, Ms. Vaughn, just one last question for you. How can people learn more about your campaign?
You can go to Sharon Vaughn for Council, which is my website. You can reach out to my campaign manager. Her name is Candace Presley. And let me give you her email address. One second. She has a lot of information about me. And then there was a recent article in the Inquirer that outlined who I am. But Candace Presley's email address is Candis, CANDIS .Blackwood, BLACKWOOD @gmail.com.
All right. Well, Ms. Sharon Vaughn, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you all. Thank you.
You're watching Hall Monitor on Channel 66 Comcast or 29 Fios, listening to us on WPPM 106.5 FM, or watching us live stream. You can visit us at our webpage, hallmonitor.org, and please feel free to send us an email with your thoughts. That was an interview with the Democratic candidate for City Council at Large. We had some breaking news this week, and we're going to go to a brief interview that we did talking about the last night's debate with Lieutenant Governor Fetterman and Dr. Oz, and also talk about the recent decision for the controller, Rebecca Reinhardt, to step down so she could run for mayor. We'll be back after that quick discussion to talk about student debt and medical debt. And again, thank you for watching us.
Hi, you're listening to Hall Monitor on WPPM 106.5. I'm Denise Clay Murray, and I'm here with Lance Haver, our consumer reporter extraordinaire, and someone who has probably forgotten more about city politics than I will ever know. But I thank you for, hanging out with me today, Lance, because we have a couple of things I wanted to talk to you about specifically. Did you also give up that hour of your life to watch last night's Senate debate between John Fetterman and Mehmet Oz?
It was very difficult to watch, but first, thank you for the kind words. I appreciate it. And you are right. I think the term we now use is seasoned. I am seasoned, and which I think gives me somewhat of a unique perspective on what we were watching last night. I absolutely agree with you. It was very painful to watch. It was hard to watch Lieutenant Governor Fetterman struggle, and it was hard to watch Dr. Oz sell more snake oil.
Yeah, the word ableism, I've seen it more on social media over the last 24 hours than I have at any other point in my life. They were because a lot of people thought that the way that Oz was kind of treating John Fetterman in terms of his fitness for office smacked of ableism. Did you see that?
I thought that Dr. Oz did what he's always done, which he's performed for a gullible population, selling something that he himself doesn't believe in. And what I also saw, unfortunately, was the way that the debate unfolded with the short answers and the difficulty that someone after a stroke has, that Lieutenant Governor Fetterman really wasn't able to call him on those issues. For example, when Dr. Oz says it's a state's right issues for abortion, I believe the pre-stroke Lieutenant Governor would have said, well, do you believe the same thing about civil rights? Do you believe the same thing about slavery? Doesn't that make you a Confederate? Doesn't that make you someone who wanted to secede from the nation? Because you believe that fundamental human rights aren't a national issue, but are states' right issues. The same reason why people supported slavery and the same reason why states left the nation. So it was, I understand people defending the lieutenant governor and saying, this is a form of ableism, but I do want to acknowledge that somebody who was not struggling in that particular format would have been better able to call attention to Dr. Oz's snake oil salesmanship.
Well, I gotta agree with you on that because not everybody is good at debate. And when you've seen John Fetterman in other circumstances, even before the stroke, where he was doing a debate, it wasn't always pretty. There were times where you would sit there and say, okay, does this guy really know what he's talking about? But what struck me is that both of them were talking so fast that you could hardly keep up. And I'm like, no wonder you're stumbling over your own words. You're talking so fast, you're not really communicating. And I'm sitting there and I'm watching as both of them are doing this. And, when you added that to the fact that it was a talking point fest, and that if you were an undecided voter and you watched that debate and that's all you had to go on, you were probably still undecided because you really didn't get any, I guess, and what's the word I'm looking, any kind of, view into what they would do from a policy perspective. If you were hoping for that, you didn't get that last night.
Right, and I think that's partly our fault as voters, that we too often ask to be lied to and asked to be fooled. So what happens is the person who appears the most glib and has the easiest solutions tends to get our votes, as opposed to recognizing that it's difficult. Immigration is a difficult issue. We have to treat people as humans. We have to figure out how to do it well. There is no easy solution for this. And there hasn't been for more than 100 years. I mean, most of us love FDR. FDR turned back a boat of Jewish children back to Germany in the beginning of World War II, and those children were slaughtered by the Nazis. Again, difficult issues, difficult times. Nobody gets it right all of the time. So instead of saying those things, we have someone who says, oh, well, let's close the borders and have legal immigration. Well, it doesn't really mean anything because it doesn't explain all the intricacies, all of the reasons why people like Dr. Oz and his family came here, because the countries they're coming from were unstable. It would have been nice again if Lieutenant Governor was able in this format to say to Dr. Oz, isn't it true the reason why you could come legally is because your family had so much money? Mm-hmm. And so there are so many points that can't be made in this type of a format. And I'm hoping that we are smart enough as voters to ask the following questions. Who's authentic and who isn't? Who's going to represent our interests and who's going to represent the corporate interest? Who's going to do what we want and who's going to do what the candidate wants? And I think if we judge the debate along those standards and forget about who was the better showman and the better speaker and the person who was able to hold forth better than the other, I think then the debate actually has some meaning to us as voters. But if we fall back to like what the Commonwealth Foundation editorial writers for the Inquirer do, which is basically say the same people who fund us, the Commonwealth Foundation, are funding Dr. Oz. So we're just going to now be in favor of Dr. Oz. That's of no value to us. If we had reporters like what we're doing saying, well, what issues came up? So let's discuss them concretely. The minimum wage. The Lieutenant Governor Fetterman says he's in favor of raising the minimum wage. Dr. Oz says he's against it. Abortion. Lieutenant Governor says he's in favor of Roe versus Wade. Dr. Oz says it's a states' right issue, just like in the Confederacy with slavery and civil rights. There was no real discussion about tax rates, and I thought that was unfortunate. And I thought some of the questions the moderators asked weren't helpful. In terms of fracking, what we found out was both of them at one point or another had different views than what they currently have. But both of them said they're in favor of fracking for natural gas. Other than that, there weren't really any distinctions made between the two candidates. They both accused each other of lying. And I think we as voters know both of them are lying. There is really no question about that. They are both lying to us. The question is, which of those issues that were clearly delineated, that were explained, that were brought out, are issues that we care about? So I care about raising the minimum wage, so that would make me likely to vote for Fetterman. I believe in privacy, and by the way, this is another point I thought that Lieutenant Governor should have made. I wish he had said to Dr. Oz, I don't remember you asking President Trump to release his taxes, because those were private, right? But my health records, Lieutenant Governor Fetterman's health records, aren't private. So I wish he had just said to Dr. Oz, when you call on Trump to release his tax records, and when President Trump releases his tax records, I'll release my medical records. And I wish he had I wish Lieutenant Governor had tied the issue of privacy to the issue of a woman's right to control her own body. And it shouldn't be a surprise to any of us that if Dr. Oz doesn't support the privacy of the individual, the privacy rights of any person, that he doesn't support Roe versus Wade, because the whole basis of that court decision was that there's a privacy right, and Dr. Oz doesn't believe in it. So I think
now go ahead.
Well, I think, again, if we clearly say, here are the distinctions between the candidates, here's what they acknowledged themselves last night, that it does give us a roadmap into how we want to vote. What are our interests and how do we want to vote? If we get lost in the showmanship, I think we lost the opportunity to learn.
Right. Now, what I found most interesting was how Oz answered the minimum wage question by saying that market forces would lead to the minimum wage going up. And I'm saying to myself, there have been occasions where the market, if that's the case, there are occasions where the minimum wage should have gone up 2 or 3 times ago.
Yeah, again, things like that just aren't true. You know, we have a Federal Reserve that says they're going to keep raising interest rates until corporations and businesses start laying off workers. And you don't hear Dr. Oz complain about that. You don't hear him talk about the fact that all of the Trump tax cuts were supposed to create jobs and they didn't. It's just window dressing. What it means is he can sound good when he sells stuff that isn't true. He's opposed to raising the minimum wage because he's opposed to government regulation. Government regulation certainly isn't always a solution, but to simply say that the market forces are going to solve everything is just a huge mistake, because they would have done it by now. Poverty would have been eliminated. We wouldn't have civil rights issues. We wouldn't have voting rights issues. We wouldn't have pollution. We wouldn't have all the trouble with violence, all the troubles that we have if market forces solved everything.
And that was another part of the debate that kind of bugged me. The fact that poverty did not come up once. I kind of attributed to the fact that this was a very Western Pennsylvania focused debate. You had no Philadelphia area representation at all in terms of moderators or questions. You had it in terms of fear mongering. When people wanted to talk about crime and violence, that was the only time Philadelphia came up. But how much of a missed opportunity was it on the part of both the moderators and the media as a whole to bring up the issue of poverty, something that impacts a whole lot of voters in the most populous part of the Commonwealth?
I agree with you. I thought that the moderators were so afraid of being criticized that they didn't edit themselves. They would have been far better asking 5 questions and getting 5 real answers. And when they did try and pin down both candidates, and they did try and pin them both down, they still didn't. They kept asking Dr. Oz, would you support Lindsey Graham's bill? And Dr. Oz wouldn't say yes and wouldn't say no, and they let him go. When they talked to Lieutenant Governor Fetterman about how he used to be against fracking and now he's in favor of fracking, they let him go. They didn't say, well, that doesn't explain what you said before. If you've changed your mind, okay, tell us that. But don't. What's the expression we grow up with if we grow up in the country? Don't pour water down my neck and tell me it's raining.
So while poverty didn't come up in this debate, it's most certainly going to come up when the mayor's race starts in 2023. And another person has thrown their hat into the ring for that this week. It's City Controller Rebecca Reinhardt. She's about to resign her job and run for mayor of Philadelphia. When you heard that, what did you think?
One, it wasn't a surprise. 2, I'm kind of hoping that former Councilman Derek Green decides not to run for mayor and run for controller, because I think that's where his strengths are. And 3, I'm interested to see whether the Controller Reinhardt is going to claim to be an outsider again. I mean, here's a woman who ran as an outsider, got elected as an outsider, and quickly became part of the power structure. She ran as an incumbent with the party's support. She supported all the Democratic Party city committee candidates. And so I think she has a conundrum. If her strength is that she's an outsider, or was an outsider and now isn't, how is she going to run? Second, I don't know how she explains that she is a part of corporate Wall Street, that her training and her jobs come out of Bear Stearns, the failed investment bank, and that she has been someone who has supported paying the bondholders every single penny of interest, even during COVID. So I think that's the second thing. And the third part is what you're talking about. You know, if she has a plan to help lift people out of poverty, she's been in office for 6 years. I'm kind of curious why we haven't heard it yet.
Well, that's kind of been the nature of the controller's office. I'm like, you all issue all of these reports telling us what's wrong or what's not being done efficiently, but you never provide any solutions for it. That was kind of the thing when Alan Bukovitz was the controller, and it's still kind of the thing here.
Right. I think those are easy headlines. And again, you know, this speaks to us as voters and as citizens. Do we accept this? Do we accept that it's enough to criticize, or do you have to have a plan going forward? But again, if you're running for mayor because you believe that there are serious problems in the city, and I believe every candidate who's running believes that, and you believe that public safety, the economy, lifting people out of poverty, addressing, helping every school have a library and be a good school, if you believe those are the important goals for government, then I think you have an obligation to talk about that and not get mired in an anti-establishment candidate who represents the establishment. I think those type of posturing doesn't help us, and we need help. I mean, I don't think anybody who walks the streets of Philadelphia, who rides SEPTA, who sends their kids to school, who looks at all the failed small businesses in any part of the city, doesn't recognize that we need help. But we need more than someone making slogans. We need a concrete plan, and as you have talked about before, and I agree with you 100%, we need someone with the courage to stand up and say, here's what I'm going to try, and I might fail. But if I don't try anything, I know I will fail. And I'm not sure that the controller, in the role that she has been in, has that backbone and that courage to stand up and say, here is my plan, and I accept that it may not work. But if it doesn't work, I will recreate the plan, I will change it, and I will do what is necessary to serve the people of Philadelphia.
Yeah, I mean, it would be nice to just once not hear from someone in elected office in Philadelphia, that's the way we've always done it. If I could just once in my life, before I am too old to enjoy it, not hear that sentence, I would be so happy, because it drives you crazy, because you're like, you know, the textbook definition of insanity is to continue to do something the exact same way and expect a different result, because it's not going to happen. And so far, I mean, it's so far, is there anybody that has put their hat in the ring so far for mayor that you think is willing to say, we're not going to do this the way we've always done it?
Well, I hope that as the mayor's race unfolds, that you'll be able to ask those questions of the candidates. And I am kind of curious how you feel about the woman with a woman who has the highest official seat in our government running for mayor. Does that give you a reason to be proud? Does that have thought for you that Rebecca Reinhardt is a woman who has held the highest office in city government in Philadelphia?
Well, here's the thing. I kind of think that no matter what, we're probably going to get our first woman mayor out of this group of candidates. Not everybody's thrown their hat in the ring yet, but I think that we are probably going to get our first female mayor, and that's good. The thing is, I kind of have to ask, why now? Or why period? Because, you know, as the city controller, there is a certain amount of power that you have over what the city does that as mayor, you don't really have as much. So the question becomes why? And while I understand that right now everybody is under the impression that they can do a much better job than Jim Kenney with their eyes closed, there's a lot that goes into that office. And I get the feeling that not everybody who is currently throwing their hat into the ring has thoroughly thought this out. And as they find out, and as like donors and voters and everybody else figures out who hasn't thoroughly thought this out, the field is going to shrink, and there's going to be a whole lot of people that left perfectly good jobs to run for an office that they're not going to win. And maybe this is just the Ollie Clay side of me, a very practical Kentucky farm woman that my mom was. But you don't leave your job until you have a new one. And that's kind of, the whole time when I'm watching these announcements and I'm, covering them and stuff, I'm thinking of my mom saying, why'd that person leave that perfectly good job without having another job? And, I still say I'm surprised that some of the people who've already thrown their hat in the ring have done this because they didn't have a backup plan. Some of them have gotten one since, but I hope it's a backup plan they like, because not everybody is going to win the Democratic nomination. And whoever does that, then that person will most likely be mayor, but it's not going to be all of you. And it's going to be interesting to hear how they all campaign against each other, because most of the time when you get the particular group of people that's in the room now, and I'm excluding Alan Don because he's not officially in the room yet, but when you get the group of people that's particularly in the room, particularly like Maria Quinones Sanchez and Derek Green and Sherelle Parker, who all came out of the Marion Tasco camp, usually when you get those people together, they're fighting for each other. It's going to be interesting to see what happens when they have to start fighting with each other.
Yes. Well, I'm hoping in the weeks to come that our listeners will contact us and let us know what questions they would like us to ask the mayoral candidates. I think that we should struggle to come up with 10 questions and concrete questions, because again, all too often, the person with the best advertising campaign, the person who's most glib, the person who's most telegenic ends up winning elections. And I think we have seen what that does for us. We have elected people with no government experience in our recent past, and that didn't work out well for us. We have elected people who are more telegenic, and that has not worked out well for us. You would have to look at someone like Senator Casey, who I would say is, to be polite, low key, but to point out how effective he has been versus somebody who, like Lindsey Graham, who is always on television, always has a quip, always has some sort of comment that plays to the crowd, and how he has not accomplished much of anything other than just to be somebody's wingman. And so I think it becomes up to us to say to the mayoral candidates, what are you going to do about the wage tax? What are you going to do about property taxes? What do you do about replacement, which sometimes gets called gentrification? How do we deal with developers? How do we bring businesses into the city? And I'm hoping our listeners will go to our webpage, hallmonitor.com, and write to us and say, here's the question I would like asked. And we will do our best to make sure that question gets answered between now and the primary in May.
Even if we have to just run up and throw microphones in front of people and just say, hey, answer this question. I'm rude like that. I'll do it.
So if we do our job and the public tries to forget about who the better debater is and who's the most telegenic and who has the most snake oil lines to sell, and focuses on what's important to us and which candidate is going to represent our interests, because that's really what elections are about. It's not about who's the better speaker, and it's not about who's the better person, and it's not even about the person who looks better. Don't tell JFK supporters that, but it's not really
Well,
about
hey,
the person who looks
you
better.
know, but it's good that you said that, if for no other reason, but when America decided to elect the host of Celebrity Apprentice, president of the United States, hopefully everybody saw how badly that went and will understand that sometimes you've got to scratch the surface. And if there's nothing underneath the surface, that tells you a lot.
Right. I absolutely agree with you, but the reason why President Trump became President Trump was back to the original Constitution and treating African Americans as 3/5 slaves. If we didn't have an electoral college based on a Senate that gives 2 votes to Nebraska, 2 votes to North Dakota, and 2 votes to California, we wouldn't have had a President Trump. The popular vote was not for President Trump, it was for his opponent. We have an anachronism that allows minority vote to control the presidency. And again, we used to talk about that a little bit, that's fallen by the wayside. But as we talk about mayor and what are the issues, I think we can focus very clearly on what do people want. I'm pretty sure we all want close to the same things. Safe neighborhoods, good job opportunities, better schools for our children, what we had, an opportunity to age in place, to see our friends and neighbors and relatives stay in their homes if they want, and enough things in our neighborhood so we can shop, do our dry cleaning, whatever it is we want. I think the same things. We just have to figure out what's the best way to get there. And that's the questions we have to put to the candidates.
Okay. Well, thanks a lot, Lance, for giving me some of your time. And we'll be back with more of Hall Monitor in a moment.
Hi, good evening. Thank you for watching us on Comcast Channel 66 or Files 29, watching us live stream, or listening to us on WPPM 106.5 FM. I'm Lance Haver. And as Denise and I spoke about earlier, we would really like to hear your questions. So if you would be kind enough, if you have questions you would like us to ask the mayoral candidates, we will be covering the race and we will be talking with the candidates. Please email us and let us know. For the rest of the night, I want to talk about something that's in the news, and that's student debt. And I want to talk about it a little bit differently than how it's been discussed. I think most people know that the medical debt is also an issue, but the student debt is what our government has been talking about. And it's true that a federal court has put the student debt program on hold. So if you are applying for to get your student debt reduced, you should still apply, but it's no longer something that's going to be happening this week. We're going to have to wait for the courts to decide. Who owes the student debt? Well, the Federal Reserve has been studying this, and they say it's 45 million of us. 45 million Americans owe a startling amount of $1.73 trillion. That means 20%, 1 out of 5 Americans hold student debts. And more than half of them are people who have loans of $20,000 or less. About a third of the borrowers owe more than $10,000, and 7% of the people with federal debt owe more than $100,000. We know that most of the student debt's for younger people, but we also know that there's a significant portion of people who went back to school or for whatever reason still are struggling with student debt. The student debt is created by people who can't afford to go to college. And so a lot of the discussion has been around who does this help and is it fair to everyone? I'd like to point out that the largest amount of student debt per student actually comes out of these for-profit colleges, some of which have failed, some of which offered worthless degrees, and most of them were marketed to people of color and lower income communities. The public schools have the least amount of debt, but the truth is that people who came out of very wealthy families are people who don't have a lot of student debt because their families were able to take care of it. And so those people who are concerned about helping wealthy people, it's great that they're concerned, that they want to make sure the help goes to people who are struggling economically. but they're really not paying enough attention to what's going on. First, there's an upper income limit. Now, the upper income limit is rather high, but more importantly, wealthy families paid for college as they went. It's middle-class families that were unable to do so. And we've seen the statistics. The student loan debt is highest among Black families. And here's a breakdown of race. As you can see, the largest amount owed in student debt is for people of color. And that is, without a doubt, it's a fact. And all of these people who claim that they're really concerned about economic justice and they don't want to help out students because it's unfair to other people, this is an indication that they're really not all that concerned about helping out everyone. It's just on this one issue where they like to talk about economic justice. And the reason I say that is these people who are complaining about helping students aren't talking about medical debt. And medical debt is what people owe when they can't keep up with the hospital bills, where it's impossible for them to pay the copay. It's impossible for them to pay for services that aren't covered. It's impossible for them to keep up. There are 23 million people, 1 out of 10 adults, who owe a significant medical debt. 16 million people, 6% of all adults in the US, owe over $1,000 in medical debt. 3 million people owe more than $10,000. And we know that the people who are struggling with this debt are the people who are less fortunate. They're people with disabilities and worse health, people who are struggling economically. And we know that's the case because we've done studies on this. But yet the focus has been on student debt. And as Denise has pointed out time and time again on our show, somebody somewhere should at least talk about medical debt, which is what we're doing tonight. So who can't pay medical debt? You know, we know that the Affordable Care Act helped people with health insurance, and we know the expansion of Medicaid in many states help people. But unsurprisingly, it's middle-class adults who are more likely than young adults to have significant medical debt. Large shares of the non-elderly households do not have enough money in their bank account, in their savings, to pay for the copays. 45% of single households don't have $2,000 in savings. So if you're unfortunate enough to get sick and go to the hospital for an operation, it's unlikely that you'll have the copay money necessary in your bank account, especially because you're not working. Medical debt is so large that it's now the number one source of debt collectors. Debt collectors collect more debts for medical debt than all of the other debts combined. Credit cards, utilities, auto loans. Medical debt is more than that, all of them combined. The total owed for medical debt is $140 billion. 17.8% of the people with a credit report as of 2020 had medical debt listed as in collections. 13% had debt in the prior year, but were not yet in collections. Of those who had medical debt listed on their credit reports, the amount was $2,424. Now, it is true that the credit reporting companies have said they're no longer going to report medical debt below $500, which is the credit reporting agency's attempt to say they're not the problem. But as we'll see, most people owe far more than $500, and even with what they're saying, it really is worthless. So one of the reasons why we talk about student debt is there are a lot of problems associated with student debt. It lowers credit scores, makes people unable to borrow to buy a car, to get to better paying jobs, unable to borrow to buy a house, to start families. If your credit score is low, you're paying higher insurance. Some employers will use your credit score to decide whether they're going to offer you a job. Some landlords use your credit score to decide whether they'll rent you an apartment. And not being able to have discretionary income, paying all that money to a student debt, drains money out of the local economy. So instead of people buying things in Philadelphia, paying for things in Philadelphia, the money leaves the city. And as bad as all that is, it's actually worse for people who are struggling with medical debt. They have all the same problems that I listed for student debt. But when it comes to medical debt, people delay medical treatment. Hospitals and doctors refuse medical treatment if someone's been unable to pay a bill. They're draining life savings to pay for bills. And the number one cause of filing for bankruptcy in America right now is medical bills. So yes, there are problems for student loans, and yes, we ought to address them. But the problems for medical debt are just as big and even larger when it comes to people not being able to get medical care. Now, the student debt, again, if you owe student debt, you should sign up even though the courts have put a hold on processing the applications. And we're going to have in our newsletter all of the information, and on our webpage, all the information about where you apply. But you can save yourself and save your family a significant amount of money if you just take the time to apply now. And it's just studentaid.gov. Fill it out, take the opportunity, keep that money so that you can start your life, so that you can invest in yourself, so you can put aside some money for the future. Now, there is a special program, and I want to just call everyone's attention to this. On October 31st, there is a program that will end. The federal government has a program that allows people who work for nonprofits in the public service to forego paying student debts. The program has not worked well. They've made some changes to make it work better. Those changes will end on October 31st. So you really only have 5 days to take advantage of this. If you go to pslf.gov, you'll be able to fill out an application, even if you don't think you'll meet the criteria, even if you don't think you'll get the help. It's well worth a few minutes to take your time. Now, why is there student debt? Why do I say that student debt is something we should help people with? Well, this chart says it all. Since 1980, the starting wage on average has gone up in America by slightly less than 20%. That's the bottom line on the chart. The cost of college tuition, room and board has gone up over 160% in the same 20-year period. The social fabric, the promise that if you go to college, you'll get out and you'll have a good paying job that will allow you to live a middle-class life, has been torn. And no longer do corporations pay enough to go forward. That being said, we really ought to address medical debt, because the reason why people can't pay their medical debt is because they don't have enough money in savings. Unlike college, which people choose to go to, no one really chooses to get sick. No one chooses to go into hospital, and no one chooses to fall behind on medical bills. So why aren't we talking about medical debt relief? The people who say we shouldn't offer help for student debt because it would help the wrong people, they should be advocating now helping for medical debt. The reality is we should help for both. And I just want to address very quickly, is it fair or fairer? It's true that paying off some college loans and while others have paid it isn't fair. But that's really not the question. Fair is a goal that we never will get to. The question is it fair to help those in need while not helping all than it is to help no one? No one says if someone who's born into a wealthy family shouldn't have the benefits. We really thank you for watching the show. We hope you contact us on our webpage for those questions you have to ask for the elected officials, for people running for mayor, and we hope to see you next week. Larry, I hope you feel better.